no is a complete sentence. Do you want to go out to the bar? No. You want to have some pot? No. You want to keep doing this addictive behavior? No. Do you want to eat the sugar? No. Do you want to stay up late? No. These are all complete sentences. Do you want to take on this project that I feel is overwhelming? No. To really recognize that it is not a requirement to justify, defend, or explain, and the other person does not actually have to understand your no. And the hardest thing about all of this is we do all of this because we want the other person to like us. And we want them to accept our no. And this is the very place where the rub is, right? We don't say no because we're afraid it's not okay. Beautiful. Thank you for sharing your lovely song, I Forgive Myself. Be myself. Yeah. Now, isn't that, for those of us who were here, Reverend Cynthia James talked about that last week. I choose me. I choose me. I decide to choose me. And we explored how important that is and how challenging that can be. So I had an opportunity immediately Monday morning to decide whether or not I was going to practice what I heard Reverend Cynthia James talk about twice on Sunday, because I was here for both services. I must have really needed it. So I woke up early for Monday morning. I had some ridiculous 7 o'clock plane. I had to leave the house at 5. And as Karen was driving, and we were going over the speed bumps and getting to the gate to leave the condo, I had the tears streaming down my face. I was in agony. I had done something with my back. I have no idea what. And I could not stand sitting in the car, and many of you know, and I couldn't. I looked at her and I said, I don't think I can get on the plane. She was kind enough not to say, you think? I don't think I can get on the plane. I don't think I can sit for 4 days in a conference around the table. I know what those are like. I don't think I can do it. And she looked at me and she said, well, what are you going to do? And all I could hear was Reverend Cynthia James's voice in my head. Do I choose me, or do I choose what I think I should do? And it might be the first time in my life where I said, I can't get on the plane. I'm going to stay home. So I went home. I got on ice. I laid on my back. The chiropractor happened to have a cancellation that morning. I went in the next day, I went in again. I was on ice and in my chair for 3 days. I gave myself permission not to move, not to go anywhere, not to do anything, and to absolutely rest. Thursday, I had my last chiropractic appointment. Monday, I was crying on his table. Thursday, I was like, oh man, you're moving really good. Friday, I was having a pre-wedding dance lesson. So let me tell you, up until I am sure, up until this last week, I would have said, well, I can suck it up. I got to go. It's my responsibility. It's my obligation. What will they do without me? What if they're better without me? Oh, I don't want them to have that experience. Right? Blah, 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 blah. Whatever it is, whatever the story is, I would have gone and I would have been miserable the entire time. And all of that time without taking care of myself. I have done this in the past. And then it's weeks, if not months, of recovery, right? How many of us have done this? Gone to work when we had no business going to work, pushing ourselves when we had no business pushing ourselves. And then it just takes longer and longer and longer to get well. I thanked Reverend Cynthia for coming and giving that talk twice because obviously I needed to hear it. Choosing ourselves is such a powerful place and an opportunity for us to practice this thing that we're talking about this month, the power of no. Now, in the science mind, we don't like the word no. We prefer yes. We think yes is a much more fun word, and we spent all last month talking about the sacred yes. And so what we want to remember, of course, is that yes and no are like the yin and yang of life. And our yes is only as powerful as our no, because otherwise we're just saying yes to everything. And you do not have to raise your hand and show me how many of us are really good at doing that. Yes to everything. And then we exhaust ourselves. We run out of energy. We become resentful. We think that, it's nothing but obligation. It's not so fun, is it? So we don't like the word no, and we really are a little uncomfortable with the word power, aren't we? And so I really want to talk about this idea that no is a place of power. Actually, the power of no is about reclaiming our personal power. Now, our personal power lives here in our third chakra, right here in the solar plexus. And, when I first got into New Thought, into the science of mind, that everybody said, we come into the science of mind and we're all living from here up, right? We're all living in our head. We have to move into our heart. Well, that may or may not be true, but I think most religious scientists are living from their heart up. I think that we don't like to talk about our power, and we are uncomfortable with the lower chakras, which are rooted in the power and the divine presence of life in a totally different way than in this, enlightenment spiritual idea that we have. So when we reclaim our power, we're reclaiming this part of us. Remember that gut feeling that you have? And those times when you have your butterflies that are moving in your stomach, that's because your power is being activated. Your personal power to show up in the world with efficacy, with an ability to choose and to make decisions and to be in the world in an effective way. This is critical as children developmentally. We must learn the power of our no. And when are we most exploring this? Well, we call it the terrible twos for a reason. In our second and third year, in all of those fabulous temper tantrums that we experience and that with our kids and that we did as kids, that is a natural developmental process. What's happening there is we are actually discovering that we're not our mom, that we're not our dad, that we're actually able to move in the world, and we begin to discover that we can choose things, that we can do things, and most importantly, that we're in charge of ourselves. No, I don't want to be picked up. No, I don't want to go there. No, I don't want to be moved. No, I don't want that dress. I want the other one. No, I don't like blue. Today I like green. No, no, no. And how many of us were allowed to say all those no's? How many of us were celebrated in our ability to say no? I certainly wasn't. I was not. It was when I said no, I was called willful, disobedient. I was, and especially as a girl, how many of us, right? We got the message, well, that's not nice. Girls don't behave that way. This developmental stage, which is a natural part of us becoming all that we can be, of discovering the truth of our personal power, we are often thwarted in a very big way in the search for obedient children. And we have not actually learned how to say no. Actually, we were punished for saying no. We were disciplined for it. And we were told it's not okay. So is it any wonder that we struggle with saying no as adults? Now, the other side of this coin is many of us have decided to raise spirited children. One of the most annoying things I used to say to people in my life as Jason was growing up, no, I'm actually not seeking an obedient child. what? No, I'm not seeking an obedient child. I'm seeking a child who understands cause and effect, who understands natural consequences and the consequences of his choices. I don't need for him to be obedient. I need for him to be awake. That's what's called raising a spirited child. And part of that is allowing them to say no, actually encouraging it and celebrating it when it's appropriate. Each time a child says no, they're taking on a little more of their life, right? And it starts at 2 and it ends at 18 or 25 as children are taking on their larger and larger experience of life. And so learning to say no is a reclaiming of our personal power. So the question really is, where and how are you giving away your personal power? I'm just going to invite you to think about that for a minute. When and how, in what situations, with what people, in what kinds of things are you giving away your personal power? When do you have the hardest time saying no? I just want you to think about that for a minute and notice if there's a pattern. When do you say yes when you really want to say no? I could have said yes and gotten on that plane, even though everything about me was screaming no. But the problem is, of course, when we do this, is we are robbing ourselves of the very energy that we need and the very power that we need to move forward in our life. Because saying no actually allows us to access our choices. No is always a choice. No and yes, right? Those are the choices. So no allows us to access our choices, and it helps us discover that we can, in fact, choose, that we have the power to make those decisions. When we choose, we do two things. One is we experience our personal boundaries. We reset our personal boundaries. And two, we make friends with discipline. So let's talk about this for a minute as we think about when is it hard to say no. So I made a list. Let's see if the things that you thought of are on the list that I thought of. Well, anything we're addicted to. Drugs and alcohol come to mind, cigarettes, but also food, shopping, spending money, sex, Facebook, television, the news, gossip, all kinds of things we can be addicted to. When we have a hard time saying no. Came up in the first service, relationships, our family, our friends, our coworkers, those people that we want so desperately for them to love us that we don't love ourselves. And so when we are not feeling our self-worth, we might have a hard time saying no. Lots of other ways in the 12-step program, right? It's hungry, angry, lonely, tired. It's really hard to say no. In our spiritual work, it can be hard to say no because we think of no as a limitation. If I say no to that, but what if it was the right thing? What if I'm cutting off spirit? What if I'm, right? Do you see we have this fantasy that it's a limitation. We have a hard time saying no at work. Sometimes saying no at work will actually cause you to lose your job. But there are lots of other times when that's not the case, when it keeps getting piled on and piled on and piled on and piled on. And if we're a generous yes kind of person, I can do it, I can make it happen. That can become pretty overwhelming. I was looking for examples of ways to say no, and one of the examples of ways to say no at work is to say, well, if you want me to take this on, I'm happy to do so. Which of these other things would you like me not to do? It's a great way of saying no. No, I can't take anything more on. I'm happy to do that, but something has to shift. Do you see? And as we learn to say that outwardly, we can begin to say that within ourselves. No requires power. It requires us to be in our powerful place. And that is sometimes very uncomfortable for the people who are used to us not being powerful. If they're used to us being in the flow and they're used to being with people who are kind or who they have an idea of, especially in a spiritual community, this can happen. And we become powerful, or as women, we become powerful, or people in minorities, or just any time that we're in a situation where we say no with power, that can be very uncomfortable for us because it seems so uncomfortable for the people around us. And we can get a lot of pushback, right? And it can be hard to say no when we're seeking to be comfortable. When we want to stay in our comfort zone, it can be hard to say no because it actually requires us to stand up and be counted for ourselves. So, family, friends, and coworkers, probably one of the most challenging places to say no. Why do we say yes when we want to say no? I will not make you raise your hand to say whether or not you do this. I am certain I'm not the only one in the room. Why do we say yes when we want to say no? You know, I spent a lot of time in therapy in my 20s and 30s as I was really dealing with the fact of my own addictions. I was dealing with being a codependent person, a child of an alcoholic, all of that, trying to figure all of that out, and began to make friends with the power of no. And the more I started to say no, the more I was accused of being selfish, a bully, uncaring, and just straightforwardly not nice. Because I was changing the rules of the game, right? No longer saying just an unthinking yes. James Aldrich, I can't pronounce his name, I'm just going to say James. James, in our book, The Power of No, he says this: you decide whom you say no to. You are entitled to choose your tribe, regardless of what society imposes on you. You decide who in your life drains you of energy and then purge them so you can soar. This does not mean you become a hermit. It means you choose your family, your friends, your colleagues, your tribe, your life. Choose. And so we think about those things that we say yes to that drain our energy, especially people that we say yes to over and over and over again that drain our energy. And it's so interesting to me when we are struggling with saying no. Oh, he's been so quiet the whole time. I thought to myself, ooh, Karen got a quiet baby for her first baptism. It's okay. It's all right. It's all right. So when we decide to say no and we begin to start letting things go, it's so funny to me. I do this all the time. I wonder if the thing that's coming next is going to actually be as good. How often do we hold on to something and not let it go, or somebody and not let it go because we actually think that what's on the other side is worse? Right? Instead of better. Emerson says we let go of angels to let archangels in. And yet we're still holding on to those people and things that drain us because we're afraid of if we let it go, in some way we think that we're going to be abandoned and that it's going to be even worse. So how do we say no? What kind of a no works? Well, no is probably not the way to do it, right? An angry no is probably not going to do it unless you really have to shout it because somebody's not listening or paying attention to you. But there is a way of saying no that works. And so this way is a conscious no. This is not a reactionary no. This is not a habitual no. This is not a I don't care no. It's an even-toned no, and it's actually respectful of the person you're saying no to, because they have a right to ask for what they want, they have a right to need what they need, and we have a right to say no to it. Actually, I found one quote that said, the hardest thing about saying no is the tone in which you say it in. That's actually the hardest thing about saying no. And so a no that works really comes from our place of consciousness. It's our ability to assess what's really going on with us and respond. Now, one of the things that I learned in this therapy that I was in during this time was this astonishing notion that no is actually a complete sentence. I know Cynthia said that last week, and when she said that, it was like, yeah, that took me so long to learn. That no is actually a complete sentence. And if I would gift you with one thing today from a psychological point of view, using no to create our boundaries and to create a healthy space for our own energy, I would give you this. This is what my therapist taught me when I was trying to learn this notion that no is a complete sentence. She said to me, remember Jude. Remember Jude. You do not need to justify your no. The other person does not need to understand your no. You do not need to defend your no, nor do you need to explain it. No is a complete sentence. Do you want to go out to the bar? No. You want to have some pot? No. You want to keep doing this addictive behavior? No. Do you want to eat the sugar? No. Do you want to stay up late? No. These are all complete sentences. Do you want to take on this project that I feel is overwhelming? No. To really recognize that it is not a requirement to justify, defend, or explain, and the other person does not actually have to understand your no. And the hardest thing about all of this is we do all of this because we want the other person to like us. And we want them to accept our no. And this is the very place where the rub is, right? We don't say no because we're afraid it's not okay. And so we do all these gyrations and excuses and all of that stuff. No, it's just a simple no. So I want you to remember Jude. You do not have to justify. The other person doesn't have to understand. You don't have to defend or explain it. No is a complete sentence. Now, James, in our book, The Power of No, he goes on to say this. The point, as always, is to increase freedom and happiness. Not being able to say no has a huge opportunity cost in that it steals energy from the yes that really matters. You won't have to say no to everything. It's not the point to regress to the mentality of a 3-year-old or do something just to be oppositional or counterculture. Saying no opens up more chances to say yes. Only now you will be excited to use the yes word. Your yes will instead become a hell yes. Your life will start filling with the activities that bring you joy and fulfillment. You will be liberated. And it all starts with no. Right? Just like everything else in New Thought in the Science of Mind, everything is ultimately resolved in the paradox of yes and no. That our yes is strengthened by the power of our no. And our no becomes very empowering to that yes that we want to make. And so we've been talking about our boundaries and our ability to say no to other people. And this is the psychological realm of no. And then we move into the spiritual power of no. The spiritual power of no is recognizing that every yes is a no. Therefore, every no is a yes. And to make friends with this idea. And what is this accessing for us? It is accessing the power of choice. You are a divine, radiant, magnificent being of love and light. The fundamental, absolutely most important quality that you have is your ability to choose. Choose God or not. Choose love or not. Choose forgiveness or not. Choose abundance or not. Do you see? This is the most fundamental quality that we have. And when we say no to a false belief, that opens up to the yes of the spiritual truth. When we say no to a human condition, that opens up the yes of our spiritual reality. And so Jared Leto, he says this. He says, let me get it. You can read it. I like to employ the power of no. We all want to say yes, because with yes comes so much opportunity. But with the power of no comes focus and engagement. Focus and engagement. Do you see, when we say no to the distraction, or we say no to the trying to please everybody, or we say no to the limitation, that opens up the yes. And it allows us to focus on the thing we've chosen and to stay engaged with it. No, I won't be distracted. I'm still doing this. No, I won't be distracted. I'm still doing this. You see, we even talked about this in our 10:30 class, didn't we? The power of meditation is the ability to discipline ourselves and stay focused. No, I won't allow this thought to take my consciousness away. No, I won't get distracted about the things I need to do tomorrow. No, I won't. I'm going to stay right here, focused on the divine presence. I'm going to stay right here on my affirmation. I'm going to stay right here. And so our no allows for that space to be created. Our spiritual no also is an opportunity to deny the human condition as causal. So not only do I say no to those things that are causing me to be distracted, I'm also then saying no to those things that are coming at me, that I decide and I know are not the spiritual truth. So I started out today with a story about my back this last week. So when I was 19, I went to the whole round of doctors, the series of doctors, and all of the stuff that was going on. And eventually I had a doctor hand me a bottle of pills, and he said, well, I don't know what to say. You're going to probably be on these pills for the rest of your life, and eventually you'll have to get your back fused, and then, you have to get your neck fused, and blah, 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 right? And I was like, inside, thank God, I had already been in science mind for a little while, and inside I was screaming, no! While he was telling me all these horrible things that were going to happen over the course of my lifetime. No, no, no. This spiritual no is the no, this is not the spiritual truth about me. No, this is not the spiritual reality. And you see, when we say that kind of no, I think of that as a spiritual boundary. I'm creating a spiritual boundary where inside me is the divine presence and the truth that I know about God, and I'm not letting the human condition in. It's not that I'm denying it. It's not that I'm not going to do stuff about it. It's not that I'm pretending it doesn't exist. What I'm doing is I'm not letting it in. I'm saying, no, this is not the spiritual truth. This is the spiritual truth. Do you see? It's creating a spiritual boundary. Because what happens when the diagnosis or the media or the advertising or the thing that our boss said or the thing that our partner said or the whatever, what happens when we let it in? We get inundated by it, don't we? We get taken over by it. We get flooded with that very thing that we don't want to have or experience. And so our spiritual no keeps it out here where we can see it as the human condition, but gives us the space. It makes room for the divine power and the divine presence. And that is the space that we need for the yes. Do you see? So while it might be about saying no at work or saying no to other people or saying, building our psychological muscle of no, it's more importantly, or at least as important, that we build our spiritual muscle of no. Because we know what the truth is, and we do not allow ourselves to become distracted by the human condition. So I don't know about you, but I am finding the need for this powerful spiritual no a lot in my life these days. Pretty much every time I look at the news. Charlottesville, Virginia, right? Is that Charlottesville, Virginia just happened this weekend? All the stuff with North Korea, all the craziness, all the hate and violence. And taking all of that in can be very inundating, can it? And it causes fear, and it can trigger anger. And yet what we know is that those things are only causal when we allow them to be causal. And so our task over and over and over again, whether it's in our own life or whether it's when we're looking at what's going on in the world, is to say, no, I deny that is the spiritual truth. That may be the human condition right now. That may be how people are perceiving how life ought to be and however they need to behave at the moment, but that is not the spiritual truth. And this, thank you. And this is our spiritual practice. Do you see? It's exactly the same spiritual practice that we have to practice for our own personal lives. We now get to practice for humanity. And we get to look these things in the face and say, no, this is not the spiritual truth about human beings. This is not the spiritual truth about America. This is not the spiritual truth about who we are. This is not how we see ourselves. Because we know the truth that the divine power and presence lives, moves, and has its being in each and every single solitary person. Period. End of sentence. No exception. And you see, when we can stand in that place, we build that little bit of space where we can now be the power and presence. We can be the light. We can bring the light. And you see, we can say no without being against something or someone. Remember that it's all in the tone. It's all in the way that you say no. From a psychological point of view, it's the same thing here from a spiritual point of view. It's not, no, that person is wrong. It's not, no, that policy is wrong. It's not, no, that activity is wrong. It's, no, that is the human condition, but that is not the spiritual truth. Do you see? And then we become emissaries of light. We actually bring the light of consciousness to reality, to the human condition. So we're going to close today with doing just exactly that. So I just invite you to join with me in prayer. And so if you would just take a deep breath with me and we allow that breath to move into that inner sanctuary. That place within us where we know the truth. We know the truth that there is one power and one presence, one life. We call it God, Spirit, love. And if we imagine this infinite reality, omniscient, omnipotent, and omnipresent, what must we know to be true about it? It is love, power, peace, beauty, joy. It is light. It is the divine, infinite. And it is forever, moving in creation. It is forever moving through all of the activities of life. Through our children, through our workplaces, through through the environment, through everything. It's all God made manifest. And so right now this morning, let us look at the human condition with our eyes wide open and with love in our hearts. Let us hear and see that which appears to be discord, disharmony, violence, tension, upset, wherever we may look in the world, in our own lives. And let us say no. That is not the spiritual truth. There is no truth to hatred nor to fear. There is nothing that holds from God any of this in place, for there is only divine love and light. And we are not fooled by the circumstances. We do not allow them in. We do not give them room. And because that is true, we bring about peace. We bring about peace in our own hearts, and we are that peace in the world. We open to love in our own hearts, and we are that love in the world. We open to light, and we bring that light into the world. So today, as we stand and we say no to that which is not the spiritual truth of humanity, we make room for the yes. We stand in that yes, and from this yes, we shall not be moved. I just invite you to breathe it in. And together we say, and so it is.